Welcome to Season 6 of Purposeful Empathy, a show dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who believe the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Today's episode is brought to you by Grand Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I'm joined by Marissa Latshaw, who is founder of Latshaw Marketing and is an experienced marketer and creator of the Empathetic Positioning Process. She helps leaders and teams activate empathy to develop brands, products, and messages that inspire action. Her inclusive approach to qualitative audience research, strategic positioning, and marketing planning has created lasting results for organizations large and small across industries, including software, financial services, manufacturing, nonprofit, and creative. Welcome, Marissa.
Hi, so good to see you, Anita.
Yeah, I'm really great. It's great to meet you because we have so many empathy friends in common. So lovely that we finally had the chance to connect. I love asking the question about how people came to how they came to fall in love with empathy and why it's so important in their lives. So is there a backstory for you?
There really is. So I started my career way back when, right? And I was in finance at the beginning, and I knew that wasn't really a fit for me. I was good at numbers, so that seemed like an obvious choice. So I made the switch to consumer marketing. So I was really interested in people and human behavior and what motivates them and inspires them and why they engage with certain brands and products and why they don't. So I got this job at a pretty well-known publisher in their consumer marketing department as an entry-level position, and they told me they were building an office for me. And I was like, oh, I'm this really young person, but they're building an office. What they actually meant was that they were putting a door on a photocopy machine room. So it was a little tiny internal office. And I basically spent like the next 2 years there. I mean, you couldn't even like roll the chair back. That's how small this was. I spent two years basically crunching numbers, and that was marketing. Like I was like, where are the people? How do we, like, my phone never rang. I never had any interaction with other humans. And I was so interested in humans, and everything was really just packaged up into data sets and segments and kind of all this measurement, multivariate testing. It was interesting. I was good at it, but I was really feeling like something's missing. So I left, fast forward, I had a couple of different sort of corporate type jobs in marketing. And after I had my son, I started at a startup, an event services marketplace called Gig Masters that's still, in business today. And, they were at their very early stages. So I joined the founders, and they had no one really doing marketing. Someone was doing development and some sales, but no one was doing marketing. So this was my chance. I was like, I get to do marketing kind of the way I really believe it needs to be done. And, I'd read about, other ways to think about marketing. And I had all of these sort of skills that I had built up over the first part of my career, but now I had this opportunity. So I spent the first summer calling all their customers and just really listening to what was on their minds, what was in their hearts, why they were engaging with this particular service, which was really changing their lives, right? So it wasn't, they weren't just selling, one little product. They actually were impacting people's lives. So I was bringing all of that information, all those voices back into the organization, and we were using that information to make decisions that would help to really meet the needs and the values of the people that they were serving. So that was like a seed for what I do today. So then flash forward, 10 plus years, I left that role in 2015, I think. And then I started out on my own and really did a lot of research on empathy. And I saw like this human connection and, began to work with clients and develop a process over the past, it's been like 5-6 years now, where I've developed this process that we can talk about in a bit, but where we look at empathy from the organizational standpoint and a marketing standpoint. And it's been a great experience since then. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of backdrop on how I'm coming at this.
Absolutely. And I obviously want to unpack this process that you developed and hear how it's working. And maybe you have a few case examples that you can share. But why do you think empathy is so key and so important to marketing, sort of at a high level?
Yeah. So I think you and I are very much in sync on this. So empathy is this superpower I believe that, we all have, and that we're born with this capacity for empathy, right? And my definition, I know we all have our own sort of little nuanced definitions, but I pulling together a lot of different definitions, the one that resonates for me is that empathy is our ability to feel and understand and respond to the feelings of others. And that the more we practice this, the stronger we get. But when we tap into this empathy in our lives, we have the potential to heal our world, right? And there's so much divisiveness in the world. And then when I step back and I think about like, how could I impact that from my point of view and my expertise in marketing, I really believe that the organizations that we live in and that we work in are powerhouses for collective empathy. So we have all these individual people who have this capacity for empathy, but are we really harnessing that and really tapping that to serve people better? So I think, our job as leaders, as marketers, is to tap into that empathy so that we can really connect with and inspire the people we serve to take actions, to engage with us, to improve their lives, and to help the business. So I feel like there's a potential for multiple benefits, both the business and people.
Yeah, you're right. We are aligned in that philosophy about how important empathy can be to transform our personal lives, our organizations, and the world, for sure. So Tell me about this process that you've developed.
Sure. So it's called the Empathetic Positioning Process. And it really, one thing I notice is that, I know that marketing is all about making meaningful, value-based connections. At least that's how I see marketing. But this doesn't just happen. And there are a lot of major business leaders out there talking about empathy. But what I haven't seen is an actual system for bringing empathy into marketing. So for businesses, they really need to get intentional and systematic about empathy. So that's where this idea for the empathetic positioning process really came from. And it looks at the goals and needs and values of the people you serve, both inside your organization. So I approach it from like a self-empathy standpoint, really looking at the employees and understanding what is inspiring them, what is motivating them, what their values are, and what their needs are for the organization. And then we look outside of the organization, that the customers, partners, donors, whoever it is that they are specifically looking to serve, and we narrow that into a success outcome, like a successful outcome that we are ultimately looking to achieve for the business. So the process has 3 C's that make it up. It's curiosity, clarity, and connection. And I'm sure when I say those words, of course, like those are such empathy based words, right? So curiosity is the first step, and that's really about identifying the people to talk to and developing the right questions to ask. So that's sort of a simplified version of there's a lot to it, but that's kind of the high level look at it. So that's curiosity. The second C is clarity, and that's where we're finding the places where the goals, needs, and values of the internal organization overlap with the goals, needs, and values of the people that they serve. So it's a really illuminating process, because what it does is sort of neutralizes a lot of sort of internal points of view and really puts them into the shoes and through the eyes of the people that they're serving. So, you may have someone in sales saying we should do this, and you have someone in customer service saying we should do this as a strategy. And now you're saying, well, this is what your customers actually, what they really care about. So the third C we bring to connection, which this is from this place of clarity, we are able to develop meaningful connections. And it's from the language that we use all the way to the strategies we employ to connect with them, and then the actual culture that we create. And that's sort of this little side benefit that I like to share, because I think a lot of organizations want to be empathetic, but I think there's no better way to get your organization to be more empathetic than to engage them in an exercise where they are actually listening to the people that they serve and taking that time at the beginning to do that self-reflection, that self-empathy piece as well.
So do you see overlap with what your model is and design thinking or human-centered design?
I do think there's some overlap. I've definitely looked closely at that. I think from, there are design outcomes that often bubble up from this work. So, for example, I've been working with a environmental foundation, and their work is very much about how they communicate to many different constituencies, and they're a 40-year plus foundation. So their audiences have really changed and evolved over time, but their communications didn't really reflect the breadth of the work that they do. So a kind of an outcome of the work that we're doing together is a new website. So the website is being designed and it incorporates all of the learnings, but there's so much more to it than just the design piece. So it influences how we think about design, and certainly with design thinking, there are some overlaps, as you say. But I think this process is very much kind of this holistic, because it's looking at the organization, it's looking at the individuals, it's looking at the people you serve, and then applying it to a specific success outcome.
Sure. Now, you've just given an example, but I'm actually going to ask you again to maybe share in a second, some of the outcomes with different clients that you've had in different sectors,
Sure.
Just so that people could really get a handle on, we've got the process now, but to really understand it at a granular level. But I want to talk about an elephant in the room for just a second, for me anyways, because I'm a marketing student.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I graduated, my undergrad is in marketing, and my first step along the career path was in cosmetics, right? So I know what marketing involves. I mean, I don't know what it looks like now in 2021 because it's been so long, but I've come a long way. And I think about the state of the world that we're in, not only in terms of like our own personal lives, but just climate change and these big existential threats. And I think to myself, do we really need to apply marketing so that we could sell more stuff to people who don't need that stuff? Like, I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to the work that you do and, how it's connected to consumerism, or not at all, or whatever. Yeah, I just want to just address that for a minute.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did, because this is something that I kind of feel is very much underpins the work that I do, in that I believe that putting profit before people isn't just unethical, that it is becoming increasingly dangerous. And I know you touch on this in your TED Talk too, right? You more than touch on it. I mean, you really get into kind of some of the pitfalls that are plaguing our society as a result of kind of focusing too heavily on profits over people, and digital technology is something that pulls decision making into some really uncomfortable places that are not good for humanity. So I really think thinking about the way we go to market is really important. It's a responsibility that we have, and I don't think it has to be, it's all for profit at the detriment to society. So we need, as marketers, to be thinking about how do we create sustainable, profitable businesses that benefit the people that we serve. So if we come at it from that point of view, I think that our businesses actually do benefit. And that's a big, because I come from this consumer marketing background where everything was measured, we have like metrics that we use to determine, is this working? Isn't it working? What's not working? I think that consumerism is going to continue. We need to inject more empathy into it.
I love hearing you say that. And, just in terms of the timing of this interview, right now, we're just on the heels of the whistleblower at Facebook coming out and talking
Yes.
about, how it's harming young girls and youth and their self-esteem, and democracy is under siege in part because of what they're doing. And so you're suggesting that leaders and their organizations, the more they can infuse empathy into their work, the better we'll all be, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the Facebook example is spot on for like what can go wrong, right? So just this idea that, if algorithms are going to increasingly make decisions for marketers, essentially, and for businesses, we are harming ourselves, we're harming our children, right? I mean, you can have a simple search interest of health food or fitness. I have a teenage son, he's really into fitness right now, but that can quickly turn into content that is really dangerous, eating disorders, all kinds of drugs, all kinds of things that we wouldn't want to expose our kids to. And we think that an innocent search like fitness would be something that should be very, very benign, but meanwhile, it's not. So there are people programming these algorithms, right? So we need to be thinking responsibly and empathetically about that.
Yeah. I have a 5-year-old daughter, so I think about that down the pike. Today's episode was brought to you by Grand Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. So you're proud of your work and you see, some wins along the way that the work you do is powerful. Can you share a little bit how your work manifests?
Yeah, sure. So one thing about the empathetic positioning process is that it has been applied across so many different scenarios, right? So, and at the beginning, I was like, I did this for a software company. Is it going to work for an NGO? Is it going to work for a manufacturer? And now I have confidence after many times doing it that it does. And of course, it's very much tailored to the individual situation and the outcome, business outcome that they're looking to achieve. So I will give you, I have a couple of examples I'm happy to share. So the first one is a project I worked on last year for a global manufacturer. And they approached me with this product that they wanted to relaunch because they found that it was not successfully adopted in the Americas, but it was successfully adopted in Europe. That the product needed to have the same features to appeal to both markets. They couldn't segment based on Europe and Americas for various reasons. So their goal was to double their market share for that product to their customers. So we engaged in the empathetic positioning process. I talked to their internal teams, both in Europe and the Americas, and we understood kind of what was on their minds. One thing that surfaced is that, and often surfaces in these projects, is that not everyone internally is even speaking the same language. So kind of level setting and getting everyone thinking about what are the goals, needs, and values of the organization and reflecting that back to them is a big part of that. So that's one part. The other part was then talking to the customers that we identified and the prospective customers for this new product and bringing those voices to the table, finding that alignment, like I mentioned earlier, this goal overlap, and then developing strategies for reaching that new market and for rolling it out with new messaging, with new collateral materials, and with recommendations for their sales team to go and sell the new product. So I have checked back in with that particular client, and they are well on their way to their 2x market share goal. And I really, feel like that's a really it's a rewarding thing to hear that it all started with the empathetic positioning process, and that we laid the groundwork for them to be going to market in a more meaningful way.
So it's working, but I'm just wondering, in your personal life, have you noticed that the learning from developing and deploying your CCC methodology for empathetic, what is it called? The empathetic
Positioning process.
Positioning process. Has that changed how you behave and are as a person in the world with your family and friends or neighbors or community?
Oh, I love that question. Yes. I mean, I think the more you read and learn about empathy, the more you are aware of being empathetic and the more reflective you are on your own actions. And that doesn't mean that I'm 100% empathetic all the time. I mean, ask my husband. He'll say, I don't know. I don't know where that falls on the empathy spectrum. But yeah, I think, yes, it absolutely makes me show up with more curiosity, and I think whenever we're curious, we are able to dispel stereotypes because we just realize that we're more similar than we're different. And I think as long as we keep our minds and hearts open to understand and truly be motivated to understand where people are coming from, the more likely we're to find that common ground. So yes, absolutely. It is part of my life. It's part of how I parent. It's part of how I show up for my friends and family. And like I said, not always perfectly, but certainly very, very much aware.
Yeah. Now, in terms of a KPI, you just mentioned that, this one client that you were working with is 2x their sales thanks to your process, or at least in part thanks to your process. Yeah. So I wonder if you could say, in addition to just the company at large as an entity that's, is a business, who else benefits from the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So, every product or service exists, and I think often starts from a place of empathy. And I often say that a founder is the most empathetic individual at the beginning when they understand that they're trying to solve a problem in the world. They recognize that this is a challenge for people, and they came up with this great idea, and they want to put something in the market that's going to address that challenge and serve people. But then over time, right, the more people they hire and the larger their organization grows, and now they're, looking at everything with a sharpened pencil and really trying to, cut costs and increase revenue. I think that some of that human empathy piece can get lost. So I do think that that's a kind of a big part of why, this is so important today.
Yeah, I don't know, as somebody who's working in the empathy space, especially within, let's say, the corporate environment, you must be seeing how often empathy, whether it's Forbes or the World Economic Forum or Time Magazine, empathy is on fire, and people are trying to, especially now post-COVID, or as we're emerging from the post-COVID, that people are really figuring out how important it is, not as a soft skill, nice to have, but how it really, really transforms organizational culture, employee well-being, engagement, retention, all of these things. So you're seeing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a real strong desire to bring more empathy to organizations. I think that a lot of people think it's kind of one-to-one, right? I'm going to treat you with more kindness. I'm going to listen better to you in a one-on-one basis. But I think to really move the needle, we need to get systematic about harnessing the collective empathy of our organizations. And that's what I'm hoping to do with this work.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, good luck. That sounds like amazing work. As a human being wandering around the world, can you think of a time when you were on the receiving end of empathy, or what I call purposeful empathy, so intentional, and what that meant for you?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think before I answer that, I just want to say that this whole idea of being systematic about empathy is very much in line with purposeful empathy. It's this true intention, this real desire to reach people, to connect with them, to listen with an open mind and heart. But yes, I'm happy to share a story. So this was many years ago. My son was probably 5 years old. We were on a family vacation, and we brought his little stuffed animal that was, just so dear to him, this little puppy that's still, was a very special puppy in our lives. And we came back to our room after our first fun day exploring, and the puppy was gone. So this is like pure devastation, right? You have a young child. So if they're attached to any blanket or stuffed animal, like it's a big deal, right? So, I called the front desk frantically because clearly they had changed the sheets, and they probably, like, puppy got swept up and all of that. And I didn't know where these sheets go. They could be sending them out to, a company, 20 miles from there. I had no idea. So a person from their housekeeping staff came up to our room, and she said to me in this like beautiful accent, she said, "To your son, the puppy is you." And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like it's one of those things where you felt like that probably had a really beautiful phrase in her native language, and she translated that. And I was like, oh my gosh, she completely understands. Like, I feel seen and heard right now. So they asked me to wait in the lobby, and this was just the best. So 15 to 20 minutes or so, I don't even know. It felt like forever went by, and a person in like a little uniform drove up in a golf cart, and this puppy was just like sitting next to him. And they went and like they found puppy. This is like miracle, right? So I just felt like these people really cared, and it wasn't because someone was telling them you need to care. Like they were working in an environment where caring and putting people first was really central to how they functioned. And that was just so valuable to me and to my family. And it's something that's become part of our lore, it's something that like will always stick with us. It's a memory that meant so much. And I just think we all need to show up that way. Like, we need to look for what people value and do our best to connect with them. So, okay.
That is such a beautiful story. And I'm so glad that your son got his puppy back. Does he still have it?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. All these years later, puppy is still a very special part of our family.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's a beautiful way to end this conversation. So thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with us. And I want to thank everybody who's been watching and listening, and we'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
Thank you, Anita. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Marissa. What if you had access to your own council of coaches to help you break free from your thinking clutter, make that important decision, and liberate you from whatever's holding you back? At Grand Huron International, you get to choose the coach of your choice anytime from anywhere. Visit grandhuroninternational.com and harness the power of on-demand coaching today.